I was just going to buy some milk for my 2-year-old. That's all. But in those few seconds, someone took him. My whole world vanished from the parking lot, and nothing was the same after. If you believe no parent should ever feel that helpless, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. This story isn't just about loss. It's about fighting back when all seems lost. The afternoon sun poured gently through the living room window, casting a warm golden glow over everything it touched. It was the kind of day that made you forget the chaos of the world outside. Calm, peaceful, almost ordinary. Inside the house, the soft laughter of a toddler echoed through the air, pure and unfiltered, a sound so full of joy it seemed to brighten even the dullest corners of the room. The little boy, barely 2 years old, toddled around in his tiny socks, his chubby hands reaching out for the colorful blocks scattered across the carpet. His eyes sparkled with innocence, his cheeks rosy from the excitement of playtime. To anyone watching, it would be a snapshot of perfect normalcy. A parent and child wrapped up in the simple happiness of a sunny afternoon. For the protagonist, these moments were everything. After long days filled with endless responsibilities, the sight of their child's smile was the only thing that truly mattered. The kind of love that made you forget yourself. The kind that made you want to shield this little being from every shadow and storm the world could throw. There was a softness in the way the parent looked at their child, a tenderness that came from the deepest wells of their heart. They scooped the boy into their arms, feeling the warm weight settle against their chest like a precious treasure, and whispered a gentle reminder, "Time to get some milk, buddy. Just milk, then home." The ritual was familiar. A quick trip to the grocery store, a small detour from the usual routine, but nothing out of the ordinary. The car keys jingled in their hand as they opened the front door, the faint scent of fresh cut grass drifting in with the breeze. The toddler's small fingers wrapped around theirs, warm and trusting, the kind of trust that only a child can give without hesitation. The parent's mind wandered, thinking about the things left undone, the bills on the kitchen counter, the endless to-do lists. But all of that faded into the background, replaced by the simple joy of this moment. The walk to the car was slow and unhurried. The child's laughter bubbled up as they spotted a butterfly fluttering nearby, chasing it with clumsy little steps. The parent smiled, heart swelling with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. As they opened the car door and carefully buckled the toddler into the car seat, they couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. In that instant, nothing else mattered. The child's tiny hand reached up, grasping theirs with the innocence and certainty that only a toddler can possess. The softness of those fingers, the gentle squeeze, was a quiet promise, "I'm here and I'm safe." The plan was simple, mundane even. Just a quick run inside the store to grab some milk. A few minutes tops. The parent placed a reassuring hand on the car roof, glancing back at the child, who was now busy pressing little fingers against the window, watching the world go by with wide-eyed curiosity. The familiar hum of the neighborhood filled the air, the distant bark of a dog, the faint rustle of leaves, the occasional car passing by. Everything was exactly as it should be. Ordinary. Safe. But beneath the calm surface, a tiny seed of unease began to take root, though the parent didn't realize it yet. There was a distracted moment, a flicker of hesitation as they turned toward the store entrance. Their thoughts drifted for just a breath, caught up in the familiar everyday worries. Bills to pay, work to finish, errands to run. The exhaustion that crept in after sleepless nights, after juggling the endless demands of being a parent. They didn't notice the figure standing just beyond the rows of parked cars, a shadow among shadows. The quiet presence of someone who didn't belong in the ordinary rhythm of this day. "He smiled up at me," the parent would later recall, their voice barely above a whisper. Tugging my sleeve, asking for his favorite song. The memory of that smile, bright, unguarded, full of innocent hope, was etched deeply into their mind. A smile that seemed to freeze time for a moment, before the world shifted beneath their feet. I was distracted for a moment, just a moment. That brief lapse, that tiny crack in the armor of vigilance, would change everything. The parents' heart thudded in their chest as they stepped toward the store, keys in hand, thoughts racing. There was a flutter of nerves, a tightening in their stomach, but they brushed it aside. Just a quick trip, they told themselves. Everything will be fine. But somewhere deep inside, the echo of that fleeting unease lingered, a whisper of warning swallowed by the noise of the day. The parking lot stretched out before them, cars lined up in neat rows under the afternoon sun. The hum of distant conversations, the shuffle of footsteps, the click of car doors opening and closing. It was a place full of life, full of strangers passing by, each wrapped up in their own stories. Yet amid the bustle, a silent danger moved unseen. In that stretch of seconds, too brief to grasp fully, the child's world was about to be torn apart. The parking lot stretched out like a patchwork quilt beneath the late afternoon sun, the rows of cars gleaming with reflections of gold and blue skies. The faint hum of distant conversations drifted on the breeze, punctuated by the occasional chirp of a bird or the soft thud of footsteps against concrete. Leaves rustled gently overhead, stirred by a light wind that carried the mingled scents of fresh asphalt, blooming flowers from a nearby garden, and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the cafe inside the grocery store. It was an ordinary scene, so ordinary that it lulled the mind into a false sense of security. Cars were parked side by side, their doors opening and closing with a rhythmic clatter, people weaving between them carrying bags, chatting on phones or pulling shopping carts. The clinking of coins, the murmur of children's laughter from a distant playground, even the faint beep of an impatient driver reversing. All these sounds wove together to form the soundtrack of a typical neighborhood afternoon. The air was warm but fresh, caressing the skin lightly, inviting calm and ease. Amid this ordinary backdrop, the protagonist's eyes locked briefly on the glass doors of the grocery store ahead. The goal was simple, just the milk aisle. A quick in and out, then back to the safety of the car and home. The child was safely strapped into the car seat, head resting lightly against the window, tiny hands pressed against the cool glass, mesmerized by the passing world. The windows were rolled down just a crack, enough for a gentle breeze to slip through, but not enough to risk anything else. The seatbelt clicked securely, the car door locked. Everything should have been perfect. But shadows don't always announce themselves. Somewhere not far off in the spaces between parked cars, a presence lingered, quiet, calculating, a silhouette that moved with deliberate ease. A figure that seemed to meld into the background, unnoticed by the busy shoppers and distracted parents. They slipped between the rows like a ghost, eyes sharp and unblinking, cold and fixed on a single target. The kind of gaze that doesn't waver, doesn't flinch. The gaze of someone used to waiting, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This was no accident. No random passerby lost in their own world. The antagonist was patient, deliberate, and ruthless. Every step was measured, every movement designed to avoid detection. Their face was unreadable, a mask of indifference hiding a storm of dark intent. Lips pressed into a thin line, eyes calculating the odds, watching the parent fumble with the keys in a distracted hurry. The slight tension in the parent's shoulders, the quickened heartbeat barely perceptible in their hurried footsteps, the fleeting glance back toward the child, all these were pieces of the puzzle the antagonist pieced together silently. The parent's hands trembled slightly, fumbling with the keys as they tried to be quick. The seconds stretched unnaturally long, each one crawling by with agonizing slowness. A knot twisted in their stomach, tightening with an inexplicable unease. A cold shiver ran down their spine, a whisper of warning that was still too faint to grasp fully. The air seemed to thicken around them, and the once comforting sounds of the parking lot felt distant, muffled, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Every instinct screamed to look around, to watch every shadow, but the mind was clouded, pulled between the need to be efficient and the innocent trust that nothing terrible could happen in such a mundane place. The child's soft breathing was a steady rhythm against the quiet hum of the neighborhood, a fragile reminder of everything at stake. The parents' fingers tightened around the keys, knuckles whitening, their body leaning forward in a rush to reach the store's entrance. And then, just like that, the moment arrived. A shadow detached itself from the darkness between two cars, swift, silent, precise. The antagonist moved with a predator's grace, a chilling calm in their approach. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, only the cold calculation of a plan set in motion long ago. The quiet click of the car door sliding open was almost drowned out by the distant laughter of children, but to the parent, it was a thunderclap, an instant where the world seemed to fracture. Time slowed. The parents' breath caught. Their hearts slammed against their ribs. They turned just in time to see a fleeting glimpse of a figure leaning into the car, the child's startled cry barely escaping their lips. Their minds screamed in shock and disbelief, but their body froze, rooted to the spot by a wave of helpless horror. In those few seconds, everything changed. The comforting normality of the parking lot shattered. The warmth of the afternoon sun was replaced by a chilling cold that seeped into the bones. The child, their whole world, was being torn away, snatched from their care by someone who saw innocence as weakness, vulnerability as opportunity. The knot in the parent's stomach twisted tighter, a physical ache that spread through their chest. Panic exploded, raw and wild. The world around them blurred, voices melting into one another as they shouted and called out, but it was already too late. The world seemed to hold its breath in that split second, a heartbeat suspended in time before chaos erupted. The antagonist's move was swift, a flash of motion so fast it almost felt unreal. The sliding sound of the car door opening was sharp against the quiet hum of the afternoon, a noise out of place, jarring in its suddenness. It echoed like a gunshot through the calm of the parking lot, ripping through the peaceful afternoon with a cold, brutal finality. Before the parent could even register what was happening, a small, fragile body was being yanked from the safety of the car seat. The toddler's confused cries pierced the air, high-pitched, frightened, a heartbreaking plea for comfort in the face of sudden terror. Those cries were pure innocence shattered, a desperate sound that shook the very core of anyone who heard it. It was a sound that would haunt the parent forever. Time collapsed into a chaotic blur. The slam of the car door reverberated as the kidnapper fled, the metal banging shut like a cruel punctuation mark on the nightmare unfolding. The parent's heart thundered so loudly it was almost deafening, pounding against ribs like a trapped animal desperate to escape. Cold sweat broke out across their forehead, slick and clammy, as their breath hitched uncontrollably. Their hands, once so steady, now trembled uncontrollably, reaching out into empty air where their child had just been. Fingers grasped at nothing but cold, cruel space. The shock was paralyzing. The parent's knees buckled, body trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rising panic. The parking lot, once a place of mundane routine, had become a scene of nightmare. Around them, the world erupted into chaos. Voices shouted, some gasping, others screaming. The sound of frantic footsteps pounding against concrete filled the air as bystanders rushed toward the scene, faces etched with horror and confusion. A woman's voice cut through the noise, trembling as she shouted, "Call 911. Someone's taken that baby." Another bystander grabbed their phone, fingers fumbling over the screen as they tried desperately to reach emergency services. The crackling urgency of the call spilled out, "My child. Someone just took my child from the car. Please, you have to help." The parent's mind reeled, fragmented by the sensory overload. Every nerve screamed with fear, every fiber of their being focused on that single, shattering moment. Their heart pounded in erratic bursts, cold sweat slicking down their back, while their chest tightened as if gripped by an invisible hand. Their eyes searched desperately, darting from face to face, from shadow to shadow, looking for any sign of their child, any hint of the monster who had stolen their world away. Around them, the parking lot transformed into a frenzy of activity. People shouted descriptions, pointed toward the exit where the kidnapper vanished into the distance, their figure growing smaller with every desperate step. Some tried to run after them, others stayed by the parents' side, offering trembling hands and words of comfort, though none could truly soothe the raw terror gripping their soul. Amid the chaos, the parents' scream finally tore free, raw, ragged, a sound torn from the depths of their shattered heart. It echoed across the lot, a desperate plea for help, a cry of unbearable loss. But even as they screamed, they felt numb, as if the world had pulled away beneath their feet, leaving them stranded in a cold, dark void. Hands reached out to steady them, voices urged them to breathe, to stay calm, but the parent could only stand frozen, mind reeling, heart shattered into 1,000 fragments. Their child was gone, taken in an instant, and nothing would ever be the same again. The moments that followed the nightmare were not measured in seconds but in a crushing blur of chaos and despair. Time lost all meaning as a tidal wave of emotions crashed over the protagonist. Helplessness first, an unbearable weight pressing down on their chest so hard it felt as if their lungs would collapse under the pressure. The sense of powerlessness was overwhelming, a terrifying realization that in a heartbeat, the world as they knew it had unraveled. Shock clung to their mind like a thick fog, dulling every thought and sense. Their legs trembled violently, barely able to support the weight of the devastation that had just been thrust upon them. Their fingers shook uncontrollably, a physical manifestation of the storm raging inside. Each breath was ragged, shallow, as if the very air had turned to stone, choking them with its heaviness. The tears came unbidden, hot, relentless, blurring their vision into a misty haze that seemed to swallow the edges of the world whole. Tears weren't just a release but a fierce testament to the agony coursing through their veins. They could barely register the voices around them, the frantic shouts, the calls to emergency services, the worried questions from strangers. The words floated past like distant echoes, muffled and unreal. All that mattered was the void left behind. The hollow space in the car seat, the absence of their child's soft breathing, the unbearable silence where once there had been laughter and light. It was as though the very air had been sucked out of the world, leaving behind a vast emptiness that echoed with a silent scream. The mental battle waged inside was fierce and unrelenting. Questions crashed over them in relentless waves. How could this happen? How could I let this happen? Each query stabbed like a knife, twisting deeper with every beat of their pounding heart. The parent's mind raced frantically, torturing itself with what-ifs and if-onlys that clung like poison. I should have been faster, the thought echoed relentlessly, a self-recrimination that burned hotter than any fire. I should have seen it coming. I should have protected him. Every memory of the last few minutes played in agonizing slow motion. The moment they turned toward the store, the split-second distraction, the brief flicker of hesitation. Each memory was a knife in their gut, a reminder of a chance lost forever. The weight of guilt pressed down so heavily it seemed to steal their very breath away. The parent's body was racked with tremors, a shuddering, helpless convulsion born of pure terror and overwhelming grief. Their eyes, swollen and raw from crying, scanned the parking lot with frantic desperation. They looked for any sign, a flash of movement, a glimpse of color, a face in the crowd. But all they found was emptiness, shadows, and the cold, indifferent gray of concrete and steel. The world felt alien now, transformed into a hostile, uncaring place where something so precious could be stolen in a heartbeat and vanish without a trace. Physical numbness crept over them in waves, a terrifying disconnect between mind and body. Their hands, once grasping so tightly, now hung limp at their sides. The warmth of the sun faded into a cold chill that seeped into their bones. The taste of salt filled their mouth as tears continued to spill uncontrollably, a constant reminder that the nightmare was real, that their child was gone. Despite the overwhelming despair, a flicker of desperate hope fought to remain alive within them. They refused to let themselves slip completely into the void. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of fear and pain, the fierce love for their child burned like a beacon, a fire that no darkness could fully extinguish. That love, raw and unyielding, was the only thing keeping them from falling apart completely. Voices of strangers reached them again, more clearly this time, the urgent reassurances, the offers of help, the promises that someone would do everything possible to find their child. But the parent felt trapped behind a glass wall of numbness, unable to respond, unable to process. Their mind repeated the same desperate pleas in endless loops. Please come back. Please be safe. Every instinct screamed to run, to search, to chase after the kidnapper, but their legs refused to move. The shock had stolen their strength, leaving them stranded in a nightmare that felt like it would never end. The world spun around them, colors blurring into streaks of light, sounds distorting into a cacophony of confusion. Yet, amid the chaos, a single piercing thought began to rise above the despair. A promise whispered fiercely in the dark corners of their heart. They would not give up. They would find their child. They would bring them back. No matter the cost. That promise ignited a new kind of fire, a determination born of desperation and love so fierce it could move mountains. It was a vow that no shadow could steal away, no darkness could dim. The parents straightened their trembling shoulders, wiped the tears from their face with shaky hands, and took a breath that was as much a battle as a relief. The battle to reclaim their child had only just begun. In the aftermath of unspeakable loss and chaos, the mind often drifts into a deep, suffocating fog, a place where hope feels distant, and despair threatens to consume every shred of light. For the protagonist, those first hours after the kidnapping were an endless whirlwind of agony and disbelief, a storm of raw emotions that battered the heart and soul. But even amid that storm, something unexpected began to stir, a quiet ember glowing beneath the ashes of grief. It was not immediate. It didn't arrive like a sudden bolt of lightning or a dramatic surge of power. Instead, it crept slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the first fragile rays of dawn piercing through the darkest night. At first, it was a whisper of thought, barely audible against the roar of anguish. I must find him. That thought was fragile at first, a seed planted in the barren soil of heartbreak. But as minutes stretched into hours, it began to take root and grow, fueled by a fierce, primal love that refused to be extinguished. The parent's spirit, battered but unbroken, began to harden into a steel-like resolve. The raw pain was still there, raw and open, but it no longer paralyzed. Instead, it became a weapon, a source of strength to fight the impossible. The world outside continued on. The police began their investigations, neighbors whispered worried prayers, the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city streets. But inside the parent, a fire was blazing. Every breath was charged with determination. Every heartbeat a drum of defiance against the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. They sat alone for a moment, the weight of the silence pressing down, the hollow absence of their child like a cavernous void in the room. But their hands, once shaking with grief, clenched into fists. The pain twisted deep, a wound that would never fully heal, but it was a wound that also gave them focus. They vowed silently, I will not let this define me. I will not let this end here. The mind raced with plans and possibilities, a desperate effort to regain control in a world suddenly so out of control. Phone calls were made, leads chased, every scrap of information hunted down with relentless tenacity. The parent learned quickly that hope was not passive. It demanded action, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. It meant stepping into the unknown, facing fears that lurked in every shadow. In those moments, the parent became something new, a warrior armed not with weapons but with love, desperation, and a fierce refusal to surrender. They pored over every detail of the day, replaying the events to find clues, to understand the kidnapper's mind, to anticipate their next move. They knew that the path ahead would be long and filled with hardship, but the promise they had made burned too brightly to ignore. Each memory of their child, the soft laughter, the tiny hands, the sparkling eyes, became fuel. Every tear shed became a vow of justice. Every breath drawn was a step forward on a journey that would not end until their child was safe in their arms once more. The parent's reflection in the mirror was tired, marked by sleepless nights and endless worry. Yet behind the weary eyes was a steel core, a determination forged in fire and grief. They weren't the same person who had walked into that parking lot earlier that day. Something fundamental had shifted. They were now a force of nature, relentless and unyielding. There was no room left for doubt. No space for fear to root. The promise was clear, sharp, and unbreakable. They took my child, but I promised I would not stop until I got him back. No matter what it takes. That vow echoed in their mind like a battle cry, a sacred oath that would carry them through the darkest nights and the hardest battles. It was a promise to the child, to the innocent life stolen away, that justice would be served, that love would conquer even the deepest shadows. As the night deepened and the city slept unaware of the silent war waging in one shattered heart, the parent rose from their place, shoulders squared, eyes burning with purpose. The fight was far from over. But they were ready. Because some promises are forged not just in words, but in the unbreakable will to bring light back to a world darkened by loss. The days after the nightmare were a haze, stretched thin across the broken fabric of time. Each hour bled into the next, a relentless loop of agonizing waiting, unanswered questions, and silent screams that no one could hear. The world outside kept moving. The sun rose and set, cars rushed past, people laughed and talked and lived their ordinary lives. But for the protagonist, life had fractured into fragments, shattered beyond recognition. Every breath was heavy, weighted with the memory of that terrible afternoon when everything changed. The empty car seat haunted their every thought, a cold, cruel reminder that their child was out there somewhere, alone and frightened. The police had come and gone, their reassurances a dull murmur behind the roar of grief. Phone calls were made, posters printed, faces scanned in every crowd. But nothing. No answers. No sign. In the endless nights, sleep was a stranger. The protagonist's mind raced, turning over every detail of that day, searching for something, anything, a crack in the darkness to slip through. Every whispered rumor, every shadowed figure, every strange sound outside the window set their heart pounding, hope rising and falling like a fragile tide. And then, after what felt like an eternity trapped in the suffocating silence, came the call. It was late, well past midnight. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock and the distant hum of a refrigerator. The protagonist sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall, exhausted beyond words but unable to rest. Their hands trembled slightly, fingers clenched around a cold cup of coffee long forgotten. The phone rang, shattering the stillness like a bell tolling through the night. With trembling hands, the protagonist snatched it up. The voice on the other end was low, cautious, a whisper carrying the weight of secrets and fear. "We may have something," the caller said. "A lead. It's faint, but it's there." For a moment, the world held its breath. The seconds stretched impossibly long as the protagonist's heart hammered in their chest. The pain, the hopelessness, the endless despair, all of it seemed to fade into a single sharp shard of hope. "Tell me everything," the protagonist whispered, voice cracking with a mix of disbelief and desperate yearning. The caller spoke carefully, words slow and deliberate as if afraid to break the fragile thread they had uncovered. There had been a sighting, a shadow glimpsed in a nearby neighborhood, a name whispered in hushed tones among those who trafficked in the underbelly of the city. A faint trace, barely more than a rumor, but enough to ignite a spark. The protagonist's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle with feverish intensity. The name was unfamiliar, but the implication was clear. Their child was alive. Somewhere. And someone knew where. The weight of that knowledge was both crushing and exhilarating. It was a lifeline thrown into the dark sea of uncertainty, a promise that the fight was not over. The protagonist's body surged with adrenaline, muscles tense and ready, heart pounding like a war drum. They grabbed a notebook and began scribbling furiously, details pouring from the caller's cautious words, descriptions of the neighborhood, possible contacts, directions. Every word was etched into memory, every clue dissected and analyzed. This was the break they had been waiting for, the fragile hope that could become a beacon. As the call ended, the protagonist sat back, breathless. The silence returned, but it was different now, charged with possibility. For the first time in what felt like forever, the darkness seemed less impenetrable. A flicker of light danced at the edges, a promise of redemption. They rose slowly, the weight of exhaustion momentarily forgotten. There was work to be done, plans to make, allies to find. The journey was far from over, but now the path was clear. The promise made in the quiet moments of despair, that they would not stop no matter what it took, now burned brighter than ever. The child's name was a prayer on their lips, a vow written in every beat of their heart. They stepped outside into the cool night air, eyes lifted to the stars. Somewhere out there their child was waiting. And this time they would find them. Life has a way of shifting beneath our feet in the blink of an eye, a cruel reminder that nothing is truly permanent, that the world we think we know can unravel in an instant. One moment, everything feels safe, familiar, predictable. The next, that certainty is shattered, replaced by a harsh, unforgiving reality. It's a transformation so profound that it shakes the very foundation of our existence, forcing us to confront a truth many of us try to ignore. That vulnerability is a constant and cruelty can strike when we least expect it. For the protagonist, this truth was not just an abstract idea but a brutal, lived experience. A moment of distraction, a fleeting lapse in vigilance, and suddenly their life was forever altered. The child they had held, protected, cherished was gone, ripped away in the span of seconds by forces they could neither control nor understand. It was a pain so deep, so raw, that it threatened to consume everything else. Hope, faith, even the will to go on. Yet even in the darkest moments, something remarkable happens. Hope, that stubborn, flickering flame, refuses to be extinguished. It pulses quietly beneath the surface, a heartbeat that refuses to cease, a light that defies the encroaching shadows. Hope does not promise an easy path or a swift resolution. Instead, it offers something far more powerful, the strength to endure, the courage to fight back, and the belief that even when life feels broken beyond repair, healing is possible. In many ways, vulnerability and cruelty are two sides of the same coin, reminders of our fragility and the harshness of the world we live in. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the essence of our humanity, the part of us that loves deeply, dreams fiercely, and connects with others in ways that transcend pain. Cruelty, on the other hand, is a test, a challenge that demands resilience and defiance. It asks us whether we will succumb to despair or rise up in spite of it. For the protagonist, the journey ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. The path to reclaiming what was lost would be long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt and fear. But the promise they made, to find their child no matter the cost, was an unbreakable thread tying them to hope. It was a declaration that love is stronger than fear, that no darkness can fully consume the light within. This story is a powerful reminder to us all, that life's fragility makes each moment precious, that the bonds we hold dear are worth fighting for, and that even when faced with unimaginable loss, hope can be a guiding star. It teaches us to hold our loved ones tighter, to be vigilant but also compassionate, and to believe in the possibility of redemption and justice. In the end, it is hope that carries us through. It is hope that fuels our resolve when the world feels cold and unyielding. And it is hope that reminds us that no matter how cruel life can be, the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity to heal, to fight, and to love beyond measure. If you're holding on to hope for someone who's lost, whether it's a loved one, a friend, or even a stranger whose story touched your heart, then you already know how powerful that feeling can be. Hope is a force that pushes us through the darkest moments, when it feels like all light has gone out, and the world is wrapped in shadows. It's the quiet voice inside us that refuses to give up, no matter how impossible the situation may seem. If you've ever been there, if you've ever faced a moment where hope was the only thing keeping you going, then you understand the weight of this story. And if you're someone who believes in justice, truly believes that wrongs should be righted, that those who cause harm must be held accountable, then you're not alone. Justice isn't always easy to find, especially when pain and loss have made the path uncertain and fraught with obstacles. But stories like this remind us why justice matters, why it must be pursued relentlessly no matter the cost. That's why I'm asking you right now to hit that like button if this story has moved you, shaken you, or inspired you to believe that even in the face of tragedy, hope and justice can prevail. Because every like, every comment, every subscription means more than just a number. It means you're standing with those who have been hurt, those who are fighting to heal, and those who are seeking truth and closure. I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever held on to hope when everything seemed lost? Have you witnessed justice being served after a long struggle? Or maybe you're still searching for answers, still waiting for that glimmer of light to break through the darkness. Whatever your story, your voice matters here. This community is a place where we can support each other, share our experiences, and remind ourselves that none of us are alone in the fight for hope and justice. And this story, it's far from over. What you've heard so far is just the beginning. There are twists and turns ahead, moments of heartbreak and triumph that will test the limits of human resilience. By subscribing and staying connected, you'll be right here witnessing every step of this journey. You'll see how love, courage, and determination can overcome even the most unimaginable odds. So if you're ready to stand with hope, to demand justice, and to be part of a story that refuses to end until the truth is uncovered, then join us. Subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you never miss an update, and share this video with anyone who needs to hear that even in the darkest times, they are not alone. Together we can keep the flame of hope burning bright. Together we can make sure justice is not just a word but a reality. And together we can prove that even when life changes in an instant, the human spirit is stronger than anything that tries to tear it down. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring. The journey continues, and with your support, it will not end until every promise is kept and every question answered.